Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to a most special gathering of the Living Earth Movement. We're going to have a special presentation today from John Cobb and Reverend Bonnie Tarwater on the Earth Crisis Support Groups. We'll hear first from Dr. John Cobb. John.
Hi. Well, I'm glad to greet everybody. This is not an idea that occurred to me, but when Bonnie mentioned it a few weeks ago, as having come out of some conversations she'd had, I said, if we really succeeded in doing that, that would make our whole lives worthwhile. It could be very important. So, Bonnie, I'm turning this over to you. I think most of you know Bonnie. She's a pastor and a psychological counselor, and the pastor of the church that she's a pastor of includes goats and ducks and chickens, sometimes rabbits. We worship with the animals, and I think that's an example of her imaginative and not only being imaginative, but acting on creative imagination. So, Bonnie, I think you have a very important proposal to make, and I look forward to hearing it.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Charles and Richard and everyone for coming, and it's wonderful to be with you. I want to just begin with a question, and that is, if you will raise your hand if you feel that you have plenty of love and support to deal with your fear, your anxiety, your despair, your grief about our Earth crisis. You have enough, Walt? Okay, I feel that I don't have enough, and I'm guessing that most of us don't feel we have enough love and support to deal with something that's so incredibly existentially painful and difficult to imagine. And I think we can just begin by remembering Margaret Mead's words. Don't think a small group of people cannot change the world. In fact, it's the only thing that ever has. And it has been my experience, both as a pastor and as a counselor, as a grandmother and wife and mother and just global citizen, that we are witnessing a time when the power of the family as a unit has truly been compromised, and people don't have as much love and support from their families that they need. Now, there are all kinds of small groups that get together to deal with many different kinds of problems, but we don't know of any that deal with the Earth crisis. And John Cobb and wrote this wonderful book that's going to be coming out next year, Confessions of a Disciple of Jesus. And we have been talking about how we could create a program or a book that would be helpful for people of faith. And then I think it really became clear to me that as a Christian, but as a Unitarian Universalist, a very interfaith pastor, I really feel called at this time to create small groups where everyone is welcome, whether they're Hindus or Muslims or atheists, whether they are spiritual but not religious. And John has taught many of us this in the course of his working on as an environmentalist and a philosopher, as a theologian. He has modeled what it means to work with people at many different kinds of people, many secular people, non-religious people, as well as religious people. So it's time for us to do this, to gather together with people, regardless of what we might have in common or what we don't have in common. For this is what people have been doing in support groups for millennia. Yes, they've been gathering together with people to share their feelings, and they are committed to getting together regularly to love and support one another. So yes, this is kind of like a family, and many families, what do? They eat together, don't they? And we're inviting people to both share their feelings as well as share their feelings about what's happening in our world, and then to actually have a meal together. Now, there's wonderful programs, models for this. There's 12-step programs, for example. I'm what you call a 12-stepper myself. I have benefited from attending and being parts of many different 12-step groups. And it's very effective if people do this one thing, this miraculous thing, tell the truth. Okay. And if we come together and we share a common circumstance that we have, that we share together, a common challenge, and we tell the truth about what's going on with us, amazing kinds of transformations happen both individually and collectively. But it's this collective small group, because so many people have talked about different kinds of spiritual practices, but I want to lift up in the Earth Crisis Support Groups the most important spiritual practice of all that I think most religions agree with, and that is loving relationships. When we can give and receive love and loving relationships, this is a profound spiritual practice. Now, there are many different kinds of small support groups that have done tremendous amounts of changing for individuals and for entire communities. Take the base communities, for example, in Latin America. They had revolutionary changes both for individuals and for groups. We have many psychological and medical groups now. Yes, if somebody has, for example, a woman has breast cancer, she will very often be invited to become a part of a small breast cancer support group. And what do they do in that group? They all are sharing a common challenge, and they all commit to trying to tell the truth about their experience and what they're going through. And they have an enormous bonding, okay, that they experience, and they become loving communities. Now, some people in a breast cancer support group might die within a few months, and some may retain these relationships and end up going into remission and having their cancer cured, and they have benefited from the program as well. And regardless of what happens to all of us in this planetary catastrophe that we're living in, we will all benefit for closer, more loving, supportive relationships. Now, another model that's very, very dear to me is the early church, because if those of you who know about the history of Christianity, this is exactly how the early church began. Okay, and it was Jesus, who was a Jew, who did the work and invited others to do the work of being hosts and hostesses, not to just other Jews or then what became Christians, but to all people who were in need. And that is exactly what these Earth Crisis Support Groups intend to do. So they shared a meal in the early church. They had this profound trauma that they all survived together with the crucifixion of Jesus. And they began to meet in people's homes. Often we know that they were many women who were leaders of this church. And we know women historically have often been leaders in showing hospitality and warmth and providing an invitation, a safe place for people to gather in their feeling and their families, in their communities, in their religious communities. And we are called, I think, men and women today, to do that same kind of invitation where we share and we are the truth about what's really going on in the world, and we share about what's really going on with us personally, and then we share a meal together. Because there are two kinds of mountains that I think that these Earth Crisis Support Groups plan to invite us to climb. One is this big mountain of sharing our feelings. And if you are like me and did not grow up in a family that shared their feelings, I want to just assure you that there's many of us who've come to this very late in life. And what I have discovered is that when I'm around other people who are bravely sharing how they're feeling or sharing about what's going on in the world, it's like a contagion, and it becomes easier for me to do the same. But sharing our feelings is not an end in itself. There's a second mountain we need to climb, and that is telling the truth about what's happening in the world. Now, there's been all kinds of new wonderful research about how people can heal from trauma. And scientists tell us new pathways in our brains can actually be forged. So we have so much potentiality that we are not at all aware of as a human family. And we have no idea how telling the truth about how we're feeling and about what's really happening on the planet, we have no idea what could happen from these groups. Now, every crisis is an invitation to grow. Yes, I'm sure you've experienced this in your life. I know I have. It is an invitation to live our lives differently. And we are much more resilient as a human species than I think most of us are aware of. So whether we die very soon, because none of us know when we're going to die, or if we have a long life ahead of us, regardless of that, we can have more close, loving relationships. So we are inviting you to do something very simple. You can be a leader, or you can ask to join a group. And we hope these are in person. But if you are, where you cannot be because you are quarantined or whatever, we've learned during COVID, we can change our life dramatically, very quickly. And we could have Zoom groups. But ideally, we want you to be with people in person, maybe 6 to 8 people. It could be just you and 2 other people. It doesn't really matter at this point. But we invite you for 2023 to give yourself and your friends and family and neighbors and people in your religious communities this gift, this as a New Year's gift. Make the invitation for people to come. We have very concise, easy to follow, the very few instructions, blessedly, on how you would run such a group. These are leaderless groups, meaning everybody in the group is charged with being able to name if there's any problems in the group. And we invite people to share truthfully 2 times around, one time around in the circle about themselves and their feelings in their life. The second time around, we invite people to just share about what's happening in the world. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't have many relatives or friends, or frankly, even colleagues as a minister who are able or willing or wanting to talk about the threats, the existential threats. We are living during the 6th extinction of life on Earth, for heaven's sakes. We can't even fathom what that means. We are now listening on the news about these threats of nuclear annihilation. We hear as Americans, not billions, but trillions of dollars, whatever that is, being spent on military. So we are living in a world in which a lot of things just don't make sense, but they're terrifying. And denial, as they say, is not just a river in Egypt. And the reason we use denial is because it works. It is a fantastic kind of coping mechanism. If you go into denial, you don't have to deal with all those feelings that are underneath, but just skin deep. Now, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and many people have shared with us that we need to break our denial in order to have this whole gamut of feelings. So you're probably like me. You can have in one day a roller coaster of feelings, from shock to anger to grief to despair. And hopefully at some point, only with love and support, we can come to some acceptance. But the good news, the second mountain, is that we can have this meal together after we've shared personally and shared about what's happening in the world. And we can talk about what we might do in the world. Now, this could be something simple, like you might want to read a book, like John Cobb's new book, Confessions of a Disciple of Jesus. It's fantastic. Or it might be a book, like I'm inviting people to have a book on Medea Benjamin, on the war in Ukraine. Or it might be, I don't know what, you might decide you want a letter writing campaign, or you might want to start involving yourself and your group in civil disobedience, or join other organizations that are doing things that you admire and you believe in. The ideas are infinite, but you need the love and support of a small group. You need to meet at least weekly and repeatedly. Now, we know this works, okay? And someone comes to mind in this Earth crisis, someone who's kind of a young version of John Cobb, someone who has continued, although she knows how devastating the state of affairs is in the world, and she continues to be a self-actualized person doing tremendous things in the world. And that person is Greta Thunberg. I'm sure all of you, like me, admire her tremendously. And she speaks very openly about her autism. Now, autism is an interesting thing because I don't know about you, but I have had the benefit of being very close to many autistic people, and they often just don't have a kind of ability to censor themselves. It can be very refreshing to be around autistic people who are just telling you what they really think. And Greta found out about what was happening in the world. She went into a deep, dark depression as a young teenager, and she had very loving, supportive family. But if you don't have a loving, supportive family, it is not time to give up. This is what the church has taught us, has taught me personally. You get lemons, you make lemonade. There's lots of people that don't have the family, either from death or from addiction or mental illness, or they're not nearby. You need to make a kind of a network, community support group wherever you are. You know, I know this as a minister. When I have ministered to people who are on their deathbeds, and one of the things many people who are dying do not have is people that are close to them that are willing to talk about their impending death. Now, I've always said to people, do you want to talk about your dying? And they often say, yes, thank you for asking, because nobody else in my family and none of my friends, nobody in my church want to talk with me about the fact that I'm dying. So it is my passionate belief that if you give people half a chance to tell the truth, that they will indeed want to share their truth with you. Now, often we may be ashamed, yes? We may be ashamed that we're so overwhelmed and we feel so guilty, you know, we're still polluting, we're still not changing our life, or you're still whatever. You know, you're still working for Lockheed or whatever your tremendous guilt is about what you're doing to contribute to this catastrophe that we are witnessing. Well, we're all guilty. And these small groups are an opportunity for us to love one another. Now, I want you all to just think about, because I used to be a drama teacher and work in the theater. We can act as if we're Greta Thunberg, even if we're not, okay? She had the courage after going through this roller coaster of despair and anger and grief. Then she had the support of a loving family, which you're going to get from your Earth Crisis Support Group, to go out into the world. And she has done tremendous things. You may say, I am not interested. I am overwhelmed. I cannot possibly do things to save the world. I can barely pay my rent. I've got terrible health problems. I've got people that are mentally ill in my family. And I have some good news and bad news. We are all interconnected with every creature on this planet. And you've heard that expression, a butterfly wing in Australia affects the weather everywhere. So whether we like it or not, we are all deeply affected about what's happening in Ukraine, about what's happening to the refugees on the borders, what's happening with the whole ecosystem collapse, the animals that are being so tremendously traumatized and killed, and floods and fires. We're all actually connected. And when we open our hearts, we feel for all of these creatures. But it's so painful, we just shut down. We shut down and go into denial. But the problem with denial is sort of like being in cement. You just stay put in one place. And we're so afraid of our feelings. It turns out, if anybody gives you an invitation to express your feelings, you know, it turns out that they're not nearly as bad as you thought, because they morph into one another. So you might be angry for a while, and then you go into despair, and then you go into shock. It's kind of a revolving kind of invitation. You just don't want to be stuck. The truth sets us free. This is what religion has taught us. 12-step programs, psychological and medical groups all do the same thing. They meet with a small group of people who share the same circumstance, and we are all in this shared circumstance right now. And they tell the truth to one another about what's really going on with them. But again, that's not the end of the story. Then they can share coping mechanisms of what they can do to become more active in the world. So, this potluck is very important. You know, suicide rate is skyrocketing. People's addictions are skyrocketing. We have so many people that are in so much despair. But I'm here to tell you, as someone who has benefited from counseling and benefited from loving relationships, and someone who provides counseling, the talking cure works. It works. That's why we use it. You know, when we talk to people, we can get stuff out and we begin to understand about what we're going through. Now, because we're all guilty and because we've all contributed to this crisis in ways that, you know, we're conscious of and ways that we don't know, we need to be able to have a lack of judgment for others. And one of the things that I think will be really important for these Earth crisis support groups is for people, for example, depending on your number, you'll have a timekeeper. People will be invited to share for 5 minutes with no crosstalk. Nobody's saying, oh, but this or that or that. You just get to talk. And that is freeing in and of itself. Okay. But if you have nothing to say, that's okay too. But we're going to just give you that 5 minutes or 10 minutes or whatever it is, depending on how many people. And we're going to sit and be with you in silence. And this can be more powerful than any words can express. So we can have faith that being together, creating community, committing to loving, supportive relationships with one another is profoundly transformative and healing, and has been the very thing that people throughout history have done. Okay. We can provide you lots of support. I know I speak for John Cobb and I are very committed to this program, and we will help you join a group. We will help you lead a small group as far as being the person who gets people together. We can open it up to a conversation if you have questions. I'd love to hear from you, what you think of this idea. And let's just open it up and hear what you think, if you'd like one of these in 2023, if you think it would be valuable, and how you feel about this this gift of 2023 that John and I are giving to you. John, I think they've highlighted you. Would you like to say anything?
Well, I already made a very simple statement that I'm not in despair. I have. Is it too late? Well, it's too late for a whole lot of things, but what we do still makes a difference. It can make a huge difference. And I may later on talk a little bit about my experience in talking about and wanting to talk about and wanting to discuss, and how very, very few people have been willing to share. And I think Bonnie understands why there are so few who want to talk about something as desperately important. And when they don't talk about it, when we don't talk about it, in spite of the fact that we know, nevertheless, our actual planning, our actual politics, our actual religion is very little affected by the fact that we may be the last generation. And I can't think of anything more important than getting people to talk about it. I think once people really start talking about it with an intimate group, it will affect the way they vote. It will affect the way they think, the way they plan, the way they act. And that's why I said it could be. I mean, of course, we may fail completely. You know, I'm accustomed to trying things that fail, but that doesn't mean you don't try. And if it works, if we really could get thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people to meet in groups of this kind, I think Congress would be a different kind of organization from what it is. So I hope we can find some way of really making it happen.
Okay, John, I think Charles, you have your hand up. Would you like to share something?
Yes, thank you. When Bonnie first proposed this concept a few weeks ago, I had just finished attending 2 complete weeks on Humanity Rising, where the focus was Earth crisis. And every day for 10 days, they had young people from around the world and experts who are serving young people. And the young people reporting on their depression, their fear, their anxiety, their stress about Earth crisis. And as Bonnie even began the first conversation about how these support groups could work, I just got so more than excited, just grateful for the opportunity to go back to all of those organizations and networks to invite them to come along with us in further developing, implementing, refining, replicating this incredibly simple, beautifully sound and solid a strategy for Earth crisis support groups. So I'm just honored and privileged to be here to be part of this, and happy to do anything and everything to help share it. And I'm sure there are other people here in the group who have questions or comments. So please use the reactions button at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. Or if you have a question, just raise it, and Bonnie or Richard or I will find you, and we're here to hear what you have to say. So thank you, Bonnie and John.
Thank you. And I think one of the things that I love about this, the way we've designed this, is that there's no special training. Okay? These are leaderless groups, meaning that what that means is everyone is charged to be a leader. Okay. And it's something that's so simple. You could just, get this one piece of paper, and you could get a group of people together and you could begin. And I think it is radical, to tell the truth. I know, I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm not related to a lot of people. I'm not around a lot of people who are really open, ready, and able to share their truth with one another. But we are hungry to do this as a human species. And I know that families have provided this historically, and we know all the reasons that the family structure has been so diminished in the modern era. And so it is whatever you want to call it, a tribe, a network, a community, a support group. If you don't have one, you need one. You need people regularly that you connect with, and you share how you're feeling, what's going on with you. And you need to bear witness with other people and what's going on with them. And we need to add this other dimension of what's happening on our planet. And then we have this other dimension, which is having a meal together. And I hope it's a potluck. Everybody needs to help clean up, but something happens when we eat together. Everybody knows this. I don't have words for it, but we all know when we've shared a meal with someone, we become friends and connected in some way. So this is not just a meeting. This is an opportunity to at least weekly gather with people to share a meal. Okay. Nobody has anything to share?
Well, I'll also add that in the research that I've done with these organizations, I found a list of 1,001 things you can do to make a positive contribution to climate solutions. And we've recently launched through Living Earth Movement a program called Youth Dialogues, Sharing from the Heart. And there's a beautiful opportunity for that new program to also incorporate the youth support groups around Earth crisis. So this is the perfect timing. This is the perfect vehicle. There's never been a greater need that we know of, at least not in our time. And so here we are.
Yeah, and somebody just emailed me the other day and said, Joanna Macy is doing grief groups, and I need to learn more about them. But I don't want to call these grief groups, because I think yes, that's one of the things that we can feel, but we can also feel high anxiety. We can also feel rage. We can also just be in shock. So there's a roller coaster of feelings that, in my experience, if we break the denial, and if we give people an invitation to share how they're feeling, there's a host of feelings in there. And the thing about expressing our feelings, it's what gives us prana and gets us in touch with our life source. That talking cure works. It has for millennia, and it will for us.
Bonnie, I think I saw Walt had his hand raised. Walt, you still like to share?
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks, John. You guys are doing great work. Charles, you're honchoing this thing, and it's really cool. Still, because I live with Bonnie, I'm well supported in the reality of our situation. That's why I raised my hand earlier, not because I have any kind of willingness to be conscious to dangerous things. It's kind of a natural reaction. And I do agree with you about the truth setting you free. And Bonnie, as you know, I've worked with and facilitated groups for 40 years of my professional life, and even before that, 10 or 12 years of other types of situations. So I'm a proponent of the group approach. And in fact, I led a research project once for an organization I worked with on taking all of the beginning stages of counseling and intake for that organization to be group oriented. So I know firsthand about what you speak. And I just wanted to add one thing, if I might. We just got done, Bonnie and I, hosting a couple that I know. Probably I know this couple 2-3 years. And it's all because of Zoom. We've never met them in person. And they just came by on their way to Seattle to, and Bonnie, of course, said, tell them we're going to have brunch, because she knows about that. And of course, we sat down and we ate. And you're absolutely right, Bonnie, about the magic of sitting and eating with someone, because conversation tends to flow very easily. People want to get to know each other, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to eat together, commune together. I grew up in the Catholic Church, and every Sunday we had a thing called communion. Some of you might have heard of that. And it was the highlight of the week as a young Catholic boy to be able to go to communion. And then in the Catholic tradition, you don't eat before going to church if you're going to receive communion. And then we would go to Mrs. Simbada's house, who's an Italian friend of ours, and eat Italian cookies and drink coffee. And that was also a highlight of the week. So I totally believe in what you guys are saying. And John, you're lending your, I don't want to say celebrity in a bad way, celebrity in the sense of legacy, maybe is a better word, to this project. Get so many people involved, and you have a voice that's really, really important in this area. Thank you for your leadership.
It reminds me of a story. I don't see any hands, Charles, so you just let me know. But I remember it was working with John Cobb in 2015 on the Seizing an Alternative conference that really broke my denial wide open. And I went through a tremendous roller coaster of feelings after that conference, because I was aware that we had many problems on the planet, but I just had been living, keeping the reality, the existential horrors of that at a low level in my life. And that conference really opened it up for me. And in part, I think I was inspired by people like John Cobb and Vandana Shiva and Bill McKibben, these people who have been living with this truth for decades, and it has activated them. But I have to share, I remember being in a planning meeting with John Cobb for Seizing an Alternative. And I remember I said one day, I said, you know, John, I'm really worried, you know, about how these thousands of people from all over the world are going to come, and you know, we're telling them about how horrible the state of the world is, and they've been in denial, and they need to wake up, and they're going to just be really upset. And I remember he said, my Bonnie, what a radical idea, actually caring about how the people who come to the conference feel. And so I guess we have some kind of history in this, John, of really caring about how people feel and how they're doing, because I really believe if people are given half of an invitation to join groups that are telling the truth, and that are not just telling the truth, that's number one mountain. The second mountain is in supporting each other and going out into the world and trying to feel like they're responding in a way that makes sense, that they feel that their gifts can be useful. And we all need to become self-actualized people, all of us, whether we our skills are in accounting or whatever our skills are, it doesn't matter. We all need to contribute. So.
I saw Cindy's hand. Cindy, you raised your hand. Please go ahead. And then I see Catherine, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I'm about to run out of battery, so I may only say a few words and then have to say goodbye. But I'm a member of St. Hildegard's Episcopal community in Austin, and we actually have a little group like this. It's online once a month. It's called Earth Circle. And I came to it because I had, I'm a farm girl. I'm so in touch with the earth, and my heart just breaks. And I had gone through a pretty deep depression about all this and realized I had to do something. And so that's what we're doing. The one thing that's different from ours than what you propose, and what you propose is brilliant. We include a section on reasons to be cheerful. And I tell you what, that's really helped. It's really given me some tools to work through my despair about all of this. But thank you so much. Blessings.
So
I hope
nice
it's
to meet you.
wonderful
And I know Nancy Mahoney. I've heard about your wonderful church.
Yes.
I've been to your church, and I've heard about this program. I have a conflict, so I have not been able to attend, but I will attend, and I'm so excited to hear about what you're doing, and so happy to meet you. And
So happy to meet you. I'm inspired.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Catherine, yeah, please.
We've been doing this at First Unitarian Church in Portland, also in what we call the Community for Earth is our environmental group that's been going for well over 20 years now. They have asked me to lead several sessions over the last year, about 4 or 5 sessions that we're calling resilience programming, and I offer readings and open questions for small groups or pairs to talk about the anxiety or fears or whatever. I have now agreed to do a 3-session progression in January, February, March for them that's a little more structured. I'm keeping my eyes out for some structures, others doing this kind of thing. What kinds of questions are you finding useful, and how do people respond to that kind of thing? But I've felt for several years that as the crisis becomes more obvious and closer to home, which I'm sure is true across the country this week, we desperately need the truth telling and the sharing and the reinforcement among ourselves. There's lots of reading. I found a number of books that are helpful. They provide some starting point for it. But I think what folks in the church are looking for is just a place to go and the questions that are being raised so that we can learn from each other and get some inspiration once in a while, because this is really hard work and there is no manual to tell us how to do this. But I think some people, it seems like some people are finding their way, and it would be great to have a support group for the facilitators of these support groups, or the conveners, or whatever we end up calling them, so that we can share what's happening. I feel, Bonnie, that this is my calling as well for this kind of tail end of my ministry, and I'll be looking for all the help and encouragement and inspiration I can find.
Thank you for saying that, Catherine. And I see Cindy has written in the chat. I wonder if we could each have each other's emails so we can share info, readings, questions. And you're saying somewhat the same thing. And Charles, I'm sure, will help us stay connected to this group. You can become a member of the Living Earth Movement.echo and come to our meetings, and also come to my church, Church for Our Common Home. But we will have we intend for this Earth Crisis Support Group to have, a place where we can all gather. And I think Catherine and I are both Unitarian Universalist ministers, and the bright shadow of Unitarian Universalism is that we are social justice action oriented, which I believe in my heart and my soul and my bone marrow. We need to be out in the streets. I live near Salem, the capital of Oregon. I can't wait to put my collar on and my signs and go out into the street and knock on my government officials' doors. But there's another element that social justice action folk often forget, and it's the feeling level, and it's the community building level. We can't do one and not the other. And most of us, we're a little bit out of balance. We're either doing too much. I tend to be a workaholic. We're doing too much and not honoring our feelings enough. But what we all know, if you are raped or have a car accident, or you are a refugee, or you have a war experience, if you have a loving group of people, you will heal vastly faster, okay? We need this. We are so isolated and lonely, and COVID has made it 10 times worse, okay? But we have become resourceful during COVID. We have learned that we can reach out. I think Nancy is here. Nancy and I are together 3 times a week. Do you mind if I share this, Nancy? We have a dream group, we have a prayer group, and we share church together. And I've never met Nancy in person. And I'm telling you, it is the repeated, constant, committed relationship that makes for intimacy. We cannot do this unless we commit to people, a small group of people, that we will be there for them and ask them if they will be there for us. And too often, if we don't have the family we want, or we can't live near them, then we have to just make lemonade, and we have to get with other people. And it doesn't matter if they're clever, if they're nice, or they're all going to be screwed up human beings. It's the nature of the human problem. You can decide and make a promise to love one another and be open to their love and care for you. And we have to have this now. Don't we, John Cobb?
I think Janine's got her hand. Oh, John, go ahead. Sorry.
I think you understand why I'm trying to make it clear. This is not something that I have spent a life on. I've never been part of a small group of this kind. I've been part of a lot of small groups, and I think there have been places where people could talk fairly honestly, but the systematic work that I think small groups need is something I haven't experienced. So I'm supporting it enthusiastically, but I'm not the one who can lead.
Well, I've just got a message here in the chat from Charles. How many interested people received the guidelines you've developed? This is a part of a book that John has invited me to contribute to, Confessions of a Disciple of Jesus. I think we have our publisher here.
Yes.
I saw her here. Is Janine here? Maybe she can say a word, but we hope to provide this book and these guidelines as soon as Janine can
Yeah,
give it to us. So please share with us, Janine. We can't hear you.
And Janine, you are unmuted, so we're not hearing your audio for some reason. I'm not sure why. So our microphone, something's not working with your microphone, Janine. Not
Oh,
sure. I'm not sure why. So
Good.
yeah, she's not muted. I think she's going to try and try something else. I thought I saw another hand up while we're waiting for Janine to try and fix her. Walt. Yeah.
Thanks, Richard. You know, Cindy, I was hoping you wouldn't run out of juice there before I got a chance to tell you this. This is something that's not profound at all, like much of what I say. Cindy, we grew and have been growing, and each year we're going to expand our garden. So we grow here, and then for neighbors and for some of the food banks and stuff like this. Anyway, what I wanted to tell you is that our garden, we now have named it the Hilda Garden. That's for Nancy and Cindy.
so I think, Janine, are you able to unmute, or maybe you just have audio problems? That's all right.
Yeah, it looks like her microphone. It's just the microphone's not working. Sorry about that, Janine. Not sure what to suggest. So if you get it back working, Jane, unmute or raise your hand or whatever. Sorry. But Killsong Yoon.
Okay, Bonnie, I really fully, I'm supportive of what you said, because from the beginning of my early parish ministry, yes, the small group really helped people to grow in the sense of community. Because when I went to the different churches, still many people, especially, our people are very private. Just me and God, okay? They never met together and share their concerns. So I have great, transformation individually and communally through the sharing group. Because each weekly Bible study, I never, gave them the facts, but we began with sharing what happened through the week. Good and bad. And then, of course, I think we need some kind of guideline. Whatever we share there personally, especially feeling levels, we need to encourage our participants to keep them as a kind of, confidential, not to go out to the community to share with other people. Okay, such kind of things, okay?
But I completely agree. There's just a few golden rules.
That's right. Yeah,
but
that's right.
And if people don't adhere to them, they can create problems. But you're right. It's simple. It's not hard.
That's right. So, but earlier you said that we don't need any training about this. So I want to just remind that we need some kind of guideline, a simple guideline for the group leader to be enabling kind of, roles. So, but now, when I listening to this, you've been doing this through the Zoom, okay, the distance. And technically, I just don't know what to do and how to do it. So at least I've been retired almost 20 years. So maybe it would be wonderful even now to invite some concerned retirees and others, neighbors, to invite to my home
Mhm.
and propose, okay, what do you think about our situation, the weather change, that, drastic change, the kind of, crisis of the planet Earth, kind of things. So yeah, I really think it is very important. So the people will be able to be awakened without telling do this or do that, but
Yes.
each individual participants will be able to come up to say that, aha, okay, they will be able to, be awakened
Yes.
to the needs of our urgent needs of our responsibility, individually and collectively. Sure, I really like this kind of, suggestion, because I've been very much isolated, alone as a retiree. I didn't want to bother other people, but I'm reminded again, isn't it time again
Yes.
to utilize this kind of small group dynamics? Thanks a lot.
Gil-sang, I am so happy you like this idea, and I want to just make an offer. I
Yeah.
come to visit my children and my grandchildren in Southern California every 3 months,
Yeah.
and sometimes I've come to visit John Cobb. And
Yeah.
I would love to come and meet with you
Sure,
and your
please.
small group.
Mhm.
So, and I offer this to anyone. I will be happy to come and help you, you don't need a facilitator. You don't need a trainer. The instructions are simple and you don't need, but if you would like just to sort of have some support in that,
Sure.
I would be happy to come to where you are in Southern California. And I say that to anybody on this call. If I could come, or if you wanted to talk to me, I'm more than happy to talk with people. And
So when you come next time, please let me know so we can get together.
okay,
So
wonderful.
now what I still, emphasize is this, because I was in the local church community. So somehow that enabling role of the moderator or group leader, so the people will be able to feel comfortable and to share their true feelings about their own individual personal lives as well as communal life. And through this process, those individual worshiping together, but there was not much of sense of a community.
Yes.
But when they have done it, they said, aha, this Korean pastor came and excuse me, sharing this.
Yes.
Yeah, Kil-sang, you really have helped us. We are part of the community, body of Christ. Yes, caring each other is increased. Yes.
Yeah.
So in that point, I really wanted to emphasize a certain kind of, simple guideline, okay. Thanks.
Thank you, Kil-sang, and I hope because several people have expressed an interest in Korea
Yeah.
and the Philippines and India
Mhm.
and Spanish-speaking countries to translate
Yeah.
John Cobb's book, Confessions of a Disciple of Jesus. So I hope I can work with you to help get these groups started in Korea.
Yeah.
I think that would be wonderful.
Sure. I've been away from Korea so long. So actually, in this country, I came, again, the Korean people are very reluctant to share their own inner feelings.
Yes.
Okay. The Confucianism was that kind of, influence, but through those encounter group in 70s and I have been able to open up myself.
Yes.
Share with other people. Yes. So I'm sure that I'm glad to hear
Yes.
that even Korean people now are able to do this more through this kind of small group sharing. That's great. Yeah. Mhm.
And 12-step programs are popular and effective across the planet.
All right.
Medical and psychological groups are being done all around the world. And these are not people who have special training, you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
They're simple
All right.
guidelines,
The
that
guidelines,
it's
yes.
not rocket science. Any person can do this. And like many of these kind of leaderless groups, you have instructions, you have things that you read, you have things that everybody agrees to. You have a process, even if you're having a problem in the group, how you can resolve those things. But it's not tremendously complicated. It's really not.
Sure.
And anybody can just begin. So I think we need to do a TED
All
Talk,
right.
John.
I think you need to do the TED Talk.
We need to have these in every continent.
I'll be glad to introduce you and support you, but you know what you're talking about. I'm talking. I know what you. I mean, I think I understand it. I don't mean that I just haven't ever done it.
Well, also
I have been fairly open about my own feelings. I don't think I've been difficult to. But nevertheless, we do have a habit in our culture, and certainly in the university culture in which I spent my life, of focusing upon the content of the idea and evaluating it in terms of its rationality and empirical evidence. And I think Whitehead helps us.
yes.
Because Whitehead says the world is made up of feelings. It's very, very interesting. I couldn't quite believe it the first time I really noticed it. That for Whitehead, energy is more fundamental than matter. And energy is the objective way of talking about feeling. So the world is made up of feeling. To minimize it is to minimize reality. And of course, I can certainly testify to the fact that leaving it out has been, leaving systematic work with it out has led to its, to this day, if you think simply rationally, this is the most important question for anyone who cares about the future. If you don't care what happens to your children and grandchildren and all that, of course, then it's not important. But for anyone with what I would call a rational perspective, nothing can be more important than survival. And of course, mere physical survival is not better than nothing, but it's not an adequate goal. And we've been talking about it for 50 years. In the last 3 years, it has cracked its way into the university. I would like to think that a university would be the first place where rationality and empirical facts and common sense, such things would play a role, but it's the last. And you really have to be awfully slow to be the last. And I personally have just been more and more aware of the huge gap between what one may get people to agree to as a rational, as a fact, and one can get people to pay any attention to in terms of how they live and think. The gap is enormous. And I still hadn't really thought about doing anything about it until you had been talking to some friends and came up with this idea. Great. Maybe my life will be worth something after all.
Oh, John, come on. No self-pity.
No, I shouldn't have put it that way, because it's not that I'm, but I would really like it if we could make a difference and really get nations to cooperate instead of kill each other. That would give me great joy. The inability to do it is not a trivial matter.
No.
And actually, what people think is so much more informed by how they feel
Yes.
than how they feel is informed by what they think. I don't think it's true in my own case, so but it seems to be simply a sociological fact
Mhm.
that people can believe outrageous things if it makes them feel good.
You know, I feel I should just share that this came out of the Living Earth movement, and there was a group of us who gathered at the beginning of this year to begin this new nonprofit. And there were many people who had ideas of wanting to participate to affect political leaders, and people had very different ideas about what they felt would be the most effective in creating a Living Earth movement. And I was the only one that kept saying, I really think we need to work with religious people, religious leaders, religious communities. And out of that conversation, John Cobb agreed to write this book, Confessions of a Disciple of Jesus. And so it is written it came out of that idea. And then the idea was, well, how could this be most effective for church communities or people who are spiritual but not religious? Perhaps they've left the church, but they still think the teachings of Jesus is valuable. At any rate, it became clear we cannot just do like another curriculum or something. There's something much more profound that this book is calling us to do. And that is to do what you've done, John, to tell the truth. You have been a truth teller. For the last 50 years, you have been a profound truth teller, giving us the first book on ecologic ethics over 50 years ago, and living a life of just tremendous stewardship of the earth and of your religion. So I think this really could be an invitation that John Cobb's legacy as a Christian theologian and religious leader could not only be in the books that he's written and the ideas that he has offered, but in a movement of people gathering together to tell the truth. And it will be very difficult in the years to come. We know that. You've been someone who's been saying that for a long time, John. It's going to get more and more difficult for most people. So it's not that these groups are in order to make people happy or to solve any problem, but it is to acknowledge that with support, whatever we have to deal with is more humane. It is what religion and what anybody with common sense knows. We do not have to be alone. Our suffering is not our enemy. It's the loneliness in our suffering. So, Charles, did you want to offer something?
Yes, I have a couple of points to share, and a couple of us in the chat have been commenting on a comment that Leo Jacoby put in there, and he's indicated that he has limited bandwidth, so he may not be able to come on video. But Leo, are you able to come on and just speak to the cookbook?
I think so, John. We'll see if the bandwidth is adequate. So rather than a support group, I envision a support group for support groups. That is, if you Google Earth in Crisis, you can find many examples of groups engaged in this emergency for the last 20 years. And I think that Catherine kind of brought up the need for a manual, or I call it a recipe book. How could we best deliver John Cobb's voice? That's what we need to hear. His prophetic voice of urgency. Lots of churches have small groups and potlucks, but they don't necessarily focus their time together on the urgency of the crises.
That's
And
it, Leo.
Well, Leo, thank you very much. And the reason that I asked him to bring that on is I was reminded that I've also been participating in the Elder Action Network that has 60,000 members, and they have a subgroup called Elder Climate Action that has recently held multi-hour training programs for their volunteers to deal with the Earth crisis. And I am proposing that we not wait for a book to be published to be able to share the essence of these guidelines. I seem to recall having been waiting about 6 months for one of John Cobb's books. So Bonnie, I'm prayerfully hoping that you will be able to help us kind of move forward along the lines of what Leo has said. And the other thing that Leo sparked, John Cobb has frequently talked about facilitating communities of communities of communities. This could be thousands of communities of communities of communities, maybe 6 to 8 members, but it could be a beautiful manifestation of Dr. Cobb's legacy. So happy to be here. Thank you, Leo. Thank you, Cindy, Catherine, everyone who's contributed. We will continue.
Leo, it's so nice to meet you, and thank you for what you're sharing. And I look forward to talking to you again. And John, would you like to share anything more about how you can call us forward in Earth Crisis Support Group?
I think maybe we should end with prayer. I feel like this has been a genuinely spiritual meeting. Most gracious God, you who love all the world and every creature individually, we thank you that you love us, not depend on what we do or think. Help us to love one another, including those who we think of as our enemies. Bless us in our new venture. Help us to be constantly open to your guidance. Amen.
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 Thank you so much, John.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Bonnie. Thank you, Richard, for making time on your family vacation to host this session. Thank you all for being here. Stay tuned for more exciting developments from the Living Earth Movement. Happy holidays. Happy New Year.